Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to Yachad's Gala evening. My name is Gideon Smith. I'm the chair of Yachad, and it's my absolute pleasure, along with the rest of the board and the staff of the organisation, to welcome you here tonight. It's incredibly heartening to see so many people who are supporters of Israel and concerned about Israel's future, but who are also concerned about the impact the ongoing conflict is having on both Israelis and Palestinians alike. You'll hear later from Hannah, our director, about the work Yachad is doing and the plans we have to continue to build support in our community for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. But before we kick things off in earnest, there are a few important thank yous that I'd like to make. Firstly, to Danny Jeff Klein, Ian Morley, and Rebecca Viney, who helped to pull together this fantastic evening. I'd also like to thank Adam Lawrence for his photography and Graham Carpenter for the beautiful music in the reception. But above all, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us tonight, for supporting this event and supporting Yachad and what it is that we do. One quick way in which you can immediately show that support is to take part in the silent auction that we're running throughout the evening. Simply browse the link that's shown in the bottom of the screen, and you can see some of the great auction lots that we have on offer. And so now on with the proceedings. We are incredibly fortunate to be joined tonight by the Right Honourable Alistair Burt, MP and Minister of State for the Middle East. Alistair is a proven friend of Israelis and Palestinians alike, and he's underlined the UK's commitment to both Israel's security and to a negotiated settlement between the parties. And like all good friends, he is occasionally a critical one. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Alistair Burt.
Thank you, Gideon, very much indeed. And thank you to Hannah for the invitation. And it's a great pleasure to be here. A heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you who's helping to amplify the voices of the pro-peace majority in the United Kingdom. It's that dedication that will ultimately help to bring about a resolution to the conflict. I have to tell you, what I have in front of me is my 5-minute version. I could talk for hours about this. I was born up and brought up in a place called Bury, just outside Manchester. How many of you here have friends and relatives in Prestwich and Whitefield? There you go. Okay, so you know where I come from. I was at Bury Grammar School. I was 12 in 1967. So what happened then meant something to me. I'm not Jewish, but I was aware of what was going on at a very early age. And then as I grew up, followed events very closely. One of my abiding memories in life is that I first went in 1979. I went with a group from the Manchester YMCA. We went Egghead buses, youth hostels. And in those days in Manchester, you got the Jerusalem Post on that airmail paper. I wonder if any of you remember. That was the old days. And in the few weeks before we went, I was so looking forward to it. And I'd go to this newsagent in Manchester on John Dalton Street that had the newspaper coming through, and it was just great. And I would sit at a cafe. I was about 21, 22, and feel very grown up. Have something called an espresso, and read the Jerusalem Post and try and feel more Jewish than I was, which, as I wasn't Jewish, was quite an effort. But that was really, it's been a lifelong relationship. I went first as a member of Parliament just in the early 1980s, but my introduction there was through Michael Fidler. Michael Fidler, former president of the Board of Deputies. Michael was my immediate predecessor as the first Jewish member of Parliament for Bury and Radcliffe, and I worked for him as a young Conservative. And he formed the Conservative Friends of Israel. So when I came into Parliament again, a few years after him, there'd been a Labour member in between us. Again, it was an automatic relationship to have. And I've then followed it through all those years, culminating in what I do now. I would be wrong if I said I hadn't seen things change in that time, not always for the better. And one of the reasons I'm so pleased, I will get onto my remarks in a moment, Harry, don't worry. One of the things I'm so pleased about with what Yachad does, of course, it's a moderate voice in a world which is exceptionally binary. and where people seem to find partners not by reaching out across something, but by making a louder and louder noise for their own people. And almost whatever country you're in at the moment, politics is being ruled by confrontation, and the voices that used to reach out and grab people are being drowned out by those who say the only way forward is to talk louder and more aggressively across the piece, and therefore you build up your own support. I think this is fundamentally dangerous. There are times to be very strident in your defense, and there are times to recognize that security is not always built by walls and defenses. Security is built through relationships, and to work on that. And I think, actually, that's what Yachad seems to mean to me. So let me say one or two things that are more on the record, if the Chronicle and the News are here, just to make sure that I've got this right. Since first visiting Israel and the Palestinian territories, I've always met with people on all sides of the conflict. That's why I think it's important that Yachad takes people of all ages to visit Israel and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, to see the reality on the ground for themselves. It's a privilege to hold the role of Minister for the Middle East in the British government for the second time. It gives me the chance to represent this country as we strengthen our already strong ties with Israel, and the chance to do all I can to move us forwards towards peace. Let me touch on those objectives. I'm happy to report that the UK-Israel relationship is in very good health, with excellent cooperation in science and academia, innovation and technology, and defence and security, and our trading relationship is at record levels. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the UK twice last year, including around the Balfour centenary. It was an opportunity for us to reiterate our pride in the role we played helping to create the modern state of Israel, but also a chance to be clear that until there's an independent Palestinian state, the vision of Balfour remains incomplete. Like Yachad, this government is committed to a negotiated two-state solution which ends the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and leads to a comprehensive peace with a safe and secure Israel living alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. This vision would be transformative, not just for Israelis and Palestinians, but for the whole region. That's why we are supportive of the US peace efforts. We welcome President Trump's commitment to working towards a peace deal in the first term of an American president, and working towards a deal that will have to meet the national aspirations of both parties. And we stand very ready to help towards achieving that objective. The incidents of recent days, a deadly car ramming near Jenin on Friday and a stabbing in Jerusalem's Old City this afternoon, only deepen our resolve and commitment to this cause. We are appalled by all terrorist attacks against innocent citizens. There's no justification for any act of barbarism. Every Israeli and Palestinian has the right to live in peace and security. The ongoing violence underlines that until a just and lasting solution occurs that ends the occupation and delivers peace for both Israelis and Palestinians, the matter won't be settled and resolved. As a close and trusted friend of Israel, and one that defends her in the face of bias and unreasonable criticism, we do not shy away from raising our concerns about things we find troubling or which we believe move us away from our shared goals of peace and security. I received a letter last week. I received lots of letters about this issue. But I received a letter last week from some of Yachad's younger members about the troubling demolition orders on Palestinian villages in Area C. And I want to respond to them now. And I had the pleasure of meeting the authors of the letter a little while ago. I've been vocal in my concerns about this in public, in Parliament, and when speaking directly with Israeli authorities. When I visited the West Bank last August, I met members of the Susia Bedouin community and saw the stress and anxiety, understandably, that they live under. Some years ago, I also visited the Khan al-Ahmar community, and I've also been on a couple of occasions to Nabi Saleh. The conversations I've had reinforce my belief that our government's robust opposition to demolitions is absolutely right. We consider them to be unacceptable. In all but the most exceptional cases, they're contrary to international humanitarian law, and they call into question Israel's commitment to a viable two-state solution. We've repeatedly called on the Israeli authorities not to go ahead with these plans, and we provide support to threatened communities, and we fund organisations such as the Norwegian Refugee Council who are working legally to hold them. So I commend you all for raising awareness of this within the Jewish community and beyond. I think our voices collectively have been instrumental in halting some demolition activity up to now, and we should therefore continue to speak out. Just as we should about all actions which may make peace harder to achieve, whether they be settlement expansion, continued violence, unhelpful rhetoric, incitement, or those who deny either the Israeli or Palestinian connection to the land. This evening, you will hear the experience of Dr. Abu El-Aish. His story is one that makes us pause, but also urges action. The situation in Gaza is a tragedy. I visited in August last year and was struck by the level of despair and just how much worse it was than 3 years previously when I'd last been there. I was shocked to hear of the attack on Palestinian Prime Minister Hamdallah's convoy in Gaza last week. We strongly condemn this attack and all such related violence. But to his enormous credit, out of the despair in Gaza and out of all his personal experience, Dr. Abu El-Aish brings an inspiring message of hope, one which is desperately needed. Let me end by stressing the important role that diaspora communities can play in promoting peace. When your voice is loud and coordinated, it can be heard in London, Washington, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Ramallah, and beyond. Please continue to use that voice and take all parties closer to peace. I've met too many people over too many years who have stories of losing families. I remember vividly being on the border of Lebanon some years ago with the young people who guard the border posts there. You will know some of them, and some of them will be families, I'm sure. And I remember speaking to this young stick of a girl, early 20s, who was in control, in command. And I said, "Do you expect your children to be doing this?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Do you want your children to be doing this?" And she said, "No." Now, if we're to make that wish come true and keep Israel peaceful and secure, then what you stand for and what we're all trying to do has got to come true. So let's keep at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alistair. We're truly grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedule, and we appreciate you may need to rush away. But it makes us all the more grateful that you took that time to share some of your thoughts and insights with us here tonight. You, more than many, I think, demonstrate an understanding of the complexities of the situation, the need to appreciate where each of the parties are coming from, and to promote moderate voices who can advance a negotiated solution. In this country, Yachad strives to raise that nuanced voice of moderation within our own community, and we appreciate you listening to our concerns and the concerns of our young people. So thank you very much again. It's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Izzeldin Abu El-Aish, known to many of you as the Gaza Doctor. He's traveled from his home in Toronto, and we're delighted that he's able to join us here tonight. Izzeldin will be in conversation with Gabriel Rifkind, and I'll allow Gabriel to provide a more fulsome introduction to Dr. Abu El-Aish. Gabriel herself has spent many years dedicated to conflict resolution in the Middle East, and more recently has also turned her attentions to the small matter of North Korea. So Gabriel, we very much look forward to your conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Gabriel Rifkind and Dr. Izzeldin Abu El-Aish.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see such a full audience, and I'm quite sure they've all come for you tonight. In fact, when Hannah asked me if I would be in conversation with you, her comment back was, "That was a very swift reply." I think I replied sort of 30 seconds later. I didn't hesitate. I knew, for me, it was a huge honor to be invited to be in conversation with you. I've known of you and about you since 2008. And in fact, we share a colleague and a friend, Dr. Shlomi Eldar. We'll talk to you more about that later. But to me, what is so powerful and extraordinary is the Middle East at the moment is a cauldron of hatred. You wrote the book in 2011. Since then, the Syria wars started. We have 500,000 people dead, 11 million displaced. The kind of tolerance, the message that you communicate is quite difficult to find in the present climate. And what seemed so extraordinary to me at the time was in 2008, at the end of the Gaza war, you had the most tragic experience of 3 of your daughters being killed by an Israeli tank firing into your home, and that you still had the capacity to hold on and to talk about coexistence and to say, I will not hate. It's such a powerful example. So when I was asked if I would talk to you, I'd already bought 10 of your books. This was in 2011 and was sort of giving them to anybody who sort of came across my path. But I read your book again this time last week, and I found it equally powerful, more powerful and moving in the current climate. And to introduce you, to say your story is, having been brought up in a refugee camp in Gaza, where the only way out was through education, then managing to get a place. Only four people from the camp actually got to medical school in Cairo, but then to specialize in fertility treatment, to go to Harvard, to get specialist knowledge in public health, then to come back to Gaza, even went to Afghanistan. That was an interesting diversion. But what I really want you to do is for you to tell your story, because it's just such an important lesson to all of us. So perhaps you'll just start by telling just the different stages and where you are now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. All of you to support a good cause together. And that's what is needed. We need to talk in one language together. We, not he or she or they and we. So thanks to Yachad, thanks to Hannah who approached me, and all of the team who organized this event. And when I'm coming here, I'm coming to speak with open heart, open mind, open eyes, with one message. And I am sure you are coming with the same goodwill. We want to get rid of everything called the other. We want to dress one robe, one dress. It's the human. Because we all were born as a human and equal. We all were born in this world as a free. I delivered babies when I worked in Israel as obstetrician and gynecologist. And I delivered the babies. And here in UK, in London, if you go to any hospital, no one can differentiate between the cry of the newborn, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Druze, from any country, the ethnicity. It's a cry of a newborn, a new hope. And that's why we are here to give hope in the time the world is endemic with despair, with fear, with incitement, with hatred, with injustice, with poverty, as if we are in shortage of more disasters and the tragedies. My life as a Palestinian, it was a war. I was fighting on a daily basis just to survive. I am living that day, but I don't know what will happen the other day. To the moment, sometimes you feel the anger about this world. And why am I here in this world? What do I do? But thanks in particular to my mother. And that's why when the people, they ask me in my life and my success and my presence here and all of my achievements, I am in debt to my mother, my wife, and my daughters. I have to succeed, and there is only one way. It's education. Someone can do anything to you, but no one can take your education from you. So I dreamed as a child, because I faced rheumatic fever at the age of 8, and I saw the doctors, what are they doing? And I said, I want to be a medical doctor, to get a better job. And I say, I am lucky to be the eldest of my siblings. And this is another responsibility. Being the eldest, you take the responsibility. I want to be a medical doctor in order to save my family from the misery of their life. And education, I say, it's the strongest mean to make the change at the individual's life, the family, the community, the nation, and the world. So I did it. I graduated from the School of Medicine in Cairo. I was proud of myself and, of course, my mother to be the mother of the doctor, to whom I am in debt. I remember at the school, if I am not the first in the class, I will be punished from my mother. Because she knows the meaning of suffering. And they count on you from early age, from the age of 7. I started to work. Every dirty black work I worked. At the age of 14, it was the first time to work with an Israeli Jewish family, to spend there 40 days away from my family. The weekend, I don't know what is the meaning of weekend. I don't know the meaning of being a child. That's why I succeeded in my life, but I will never forget from where did I come. And there are millions, not Palestinians, in this world, millions of children who are still there stuck, and they are waiting for us, for all of us to give them hand, to save them, to rescue them. And we need to feel that we are not living for ourselves. We need to live for others. If you reach the shore, how many people are still there inside the ocean drowning? And they are waiting for us to give them hands. I worked in Israel because I believed in that message of medicine. I was the first Palestinian doctor to practice medicine in an Israeli hospital formally, to get the staff position, because for me, medicine and health are the human equalizer, stabilizer, socializer, and harmonizer. And we can use it to equalize between people. When we treat all of them inside the hospital, they are equal. Why not to live outside equally and as a free people? That's why we are here to spread a human message in a time the world is endemic with violence, but all of this is man-made.
Can I pick up this idea of spreading the human question? Because one of the things as I was reading the book, but I was thinking that why is it that some people hate and other people find the capacity not to hate? And coming from a psychological background myself, and always interested in the link between psychology and politics and what makes people behave in a particular way, one of the key things that I picked up from you is that you had a lot of human contact. You talk about this moshav, this Sephardi family where you spent time when you were 14. You've, of course, had the very profound experience of working with medical doctors. But one of the problems often, and what's happening more and more, is the more you have walls, the more you separate people out, and the less contact you have. What you have is fear, and then fear sometimes turns to hatred. But we're living in a world where you've got more separation out, your story is about bridge making and reaching out. So can you tell us more about, so we can understand why you don't hate? So
I will tell you, hatred, for me, and even most of my research these days, is about the issue of hatred. And my definition of hatred, you are psychologists. Psychologists, they define hatred as a feeling. For me, hatred is a chronic, destructive disease which is contagious and is the result of exposure. I can't teach someone to hate, but when I expose someone to harm as diseases, which are the result of exposure to any pathological, physical, chemical harm, the reaction of the body will be hatred. So for me, when I say I shall not hate, I will never be sick with this destructive disease. And that's when anyone to do harm to you, with hatred you become weak and you are destroying yourself, and that's the moment. The other, the one who did bad things to you, he wants to see you weak and collapsed. You need to take care of yourself and not to allow this disease. I will never hate anyone, any human being, because I want to protect, I want to be strong and to move forward and to challenge what is going on in this world.
I mean, you were so right. And the hatred is a kind of poison, and it gets into the system.
It's a fire. It's a fire which burns the one who carries it. It doesn't go beyond the one who carries it and the beloved ones.
But perhaps tell us more about the conditions that create hatred. Tell me what it was like living in Gaza. Tell us what Gaza is like now. Because you get dysfunctional societies, you get people who have been poisoned, but it happens for a reason. Perhaps you could tell us more about that.
It's good that you mentioned it's the causal relationship. Yeah. There are things which are related to causes, but the situation in Gaza Strip, where I was born and lived, and I feel sad about what is happening these days in Gaza. It's a human tragedy. It's a human disaster. It's not political. And we must not politicize these issues. We need to humanize it. Gaza Strip, which is more than 2 million people living there, 50% of the population are children below the age of 16 years old. These 16 years old, they witnessed 3 wars from 2008 till now. They didn't know the meaning of a freedom or life. 25% are women in their reproductive age. So this means the majority of the Gazan population are women and the children. And they are paying the price of political conflict. There is no life in Gaza. I go to Gaza. It's lifeless. It's hopeless. It's jobless. It's helpless. Imagine yourself if you are living at home, your home, and you are disconnected from internet for 30 minutes. How do you feel? For 30 minutes without internet. What about people in Gaza Strip where the literacy rate in Gaza Strip is about 97%? It's the most educated people in the Middle East. Gaza Strip has the highest number of PhD candidates because they focus and they invest in education. But what is the value of this education when they are hopeless, helpless, jobless? All of the time they are busy with the schedule of electricity. How many hours? 4 hours, 6 hours. It's the dignity of the humanity. People, children, they have no food. Women are running, begging here and there. It's a tragedy under the witnesses of all of the world and what is happening. And by the end, if we want to blame if these people, they became what we call extremists, instead of blaming them, and that's what in my life, not to blame someone, we need to take responsibility and to ask, why is this happening, and what can we do to contain and to alleviate the suffering of human beings?
Can we perhaps explore that one? You say that you used to take medical doctors into Gaza. Have you ever taken politicians, senior politicians into Gaza? Because one gets a feeling in Israel that they sort of turned a blind eye. They're not really, it's sort of almost hermetically sealed off. And it's almost easier not to think about it. In fact, we could say that, maybe we don't even focus that on Israel. We could say Egypt's done something similar, even the European Union.
All are responsible about it.
There's a kind of collective responsibility for not looking. If we were to look and to see what's happening, actually, do you know Don McIntyre? He's a journalist who's just written a book on Gaza. And one of the things he talks about is the very entrepreneurial spirit of the people of Gaza. And as you say, the highest level of PhDs and huge unemployment and frustration and all the conditions for radicalization and frustration. If people were listening, what would you suggest would make a difference?
I used to take politicians in the good days when the borders, and that's what I believe we need to communicate as Palestinians and Israelis and in the world. We need to build the bridges and to let the people, because most of the challenges, they come from ignorance and lack of knowledge. We don't know each other. Yeah. And that's what I learned from my daughter, Bisan, when I sent to Bees Camp at the age of 14. She came to say to me, I realized how similar are we. So we need to know each other. We need to connect each other. When we are disconnected, you can judge without knowing. So I used to do it, but with the deterioration of the situation and even inability to cross the borders because the Israelis, they don't allow. I am sure there are many Israelis who are willing to go to Gaza and to help and to communicate with Palestinians. But of course, it's the government which doesn't allow because they need permits and to take responsibility. And that's the only way. We need more communication, interaction, and to show empathy and compassion to each other and to know each other. But I'm trying to do it even now through the foundation to bring Palestinian, Israeli, Jordanian, Syrian, Egyptian young women to study together, to learn together at universities in Canada, in the States, and we have some before in UK, and we look forward to have more in UK through Daughters for Life Foundation that I established in memory of my daughters. Also, we support these young women back home in Israel, in Palestine, in Jordan, in Syria, and Lebanon. It's interesting, just May 2016, I joined the mission of the Premier of Ontario, and we gave 30 awards for Palestinian young women in Ramallah and 30 Israeli young women from different universities, from Haifa, from Ben Gurion, or from Akhva College. We gave them the full scholarship to study at their universities. It touched me after we gave the award to one of these scholars, an Israeli Jewish young woman, her father to approach me to say, today you are giving her the award. But I want to tell you that you are the one who delivered her at Soroka Hospital. Believe me, and that's what we need to have. That's the good thing. What legacy, always I ask, politicians in particular, what legacy do they want to leave behind?
I mean, I think everybody here would only applaud your example. But my experience, having worked with Palestinians and Israelis for 2 decades, and I only speak as an outsider, but first of all, Palestinians mostly don't want to sit with Israelis. They say it's normalization. They say Israelis have too much power. We sit together and then we go through the border crossings, and I've known people to be arrested after that. And then what happens is often people sit together and they realize the political gaps are even greater than we anticipated. So one of the things I think the notion of empathy and reaching out and humanizing, of course, one would applaud that. But how far in this current climate, how far is that when so much destruction has happened? I mean, you're an extraordinary example of it. How far are people actually so far away from that state of mind? And how far do we kind of have to deal with the big gaps, the big differences, what we call the radical differences, and kind of think about some, almost like things, first of all, how do you end the violence? How people need a kind of period of quiet before they can even start having respectful relationships.
But this gap, which is increasing day after day, if you go backwards, in 1994, after Oslo Agreement, we were so close. Before Oslo Agreement, we were far from each other. No one dreamed one day that Rabin, Shimon Peres will shake hands with Yasser Arafat. So nothing, and that's what I believe in, nothing is impossible. Whatever the gap is, whatever the situation is deteriorating, but still there is hope.
There has to be.
There is hope because the hope is there. As long as we are living, there is hope. As in medicine, and that's what I practice. As long as the patient is still alive, there is hope. It may be deteriorating in the intensive care, but still the patient is alive. But we need to ask why the patient is not improving. Maybe the diagnosis is wrong. Once the diagnosis is wrong, the treatment is wrong. So we need to ask ourselves what is going on there. And I say, it's important we are there as Palestinians and Israelis.
So the diagnosis is wrong, okay, I'll go with you on that, and we need a massive dose of hope. Okay, what's it going to look like? Where's that going to come from, and what needs to happen?
From the hope, of course, it's the responsibility of all. I don't want to blame Palestinians with all of the Palestinian people, leaders and public, the Israeli leadership and public, the international community, because there is a stake for each one in this world in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Putting an end to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict will have a positive impact in the world. Because you see, what do we invest? All of the world is working on it. And even what is happening in Syria, you mentioned Syria. Syria, I see the impact of the conflict in Syria, it's global now, with the issue of refugees in Canada, in the States, in Germany, in UK, everywhere. Even I can say, what is going on in Syria, it looks like World War III. In the small size, many countries are engaged in what is going on in Syria. And the same for the Palestinian. We are not in shortage of more conflicts. Enough conflicts. So I think, and I believe, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, now it's time for the world, all the world, to come together, not only to facilitate, to mediate, and to put an end in a peaceful, just way for all. And no one can turn his back. We as Palestinians and Israelis, we are living there. And I said it many times. No one can deny the existence of the other. We are existing there as Palestinians, we as Palestinians and Israelis. And we are like conjoined twins. Conjoined twins. Any harm in Israel will impact the Palestinians. Any harm in Palestine will impact the Israelis. They can't live in isolation, even to the level, I can say it, the safety, the security, the future, the freedom, the independence of Israel is linked and dependent on the Palestinians. And we are also dependent on the Israelis. We can't live in isolation from each other. So we need that on, of course, on the foundation of equal rights, respect of each other, and enough violence. I don't know how the people, they think, any politician, any leader, before he wages war, to think for a second, to close his eyes, what will be the consequences of war. It's our children, our innocent people. I say our Palestinians and Israelis. It's our children. And always I think of the wounds and the consequences of war on the people.
And you understand that as a doctor very, very well. Now, suppose, and in fact, one of the things you described is, and I know that, you can sit in a room and you don't know who people are, who they are, and you actually don't know if it's a Palestinian or Israeli who's speaking, and you describe how the similarities, they all speak with their hands, they shout, they don't listen, and they love family. But actually underneath there's this huge connection. But the question I want to ask you is, suppose Netanyahu said to you, just come and sit with me, I want to spend an hour with you. Look, you're a man of wisdom, you have had such profound experiences.
Are you sure is he going to invite me?
We'll see if we can arrange it.
Or imagination?
Wait, who knows? Who knows? Maybe people have got some good contacts in this room and see what happens later. So he says, look, I want to draw on your wisdom. I've had enough of conflict. Just
I think
help.
he's the wisest.
Yeah.
Why to invite me? He believes that he is the wisest.
Yeah, first of all, you have to in the first place realize there's something to learn. But,
yes.
Okay,
Let us negotiate not to be as wise, because let him, he is the wisest, and I am going.
I think we might suggest a few meetings with him and his a few people in his cabinet. But what do they need to learn? What do they need to understand? How can we change this climate that is so hostile at the moment?
It's hostile in environment and the climate. I will ask him, Mr. Netanyahu, what do you want? Do you want two-state solution? If you want two-state solution, let us move ahead. The map is there. Let the Palestinians be free, and you are free, and do whatever you want in your own state. Do whatever you want, shape it the way you want. And I am supportive, and to be good neighbors as two states, good neighbor, and to build even a bridges, collaboration. I will say to him, we want to change the equation from violence, conflict, into partnership and sharing, from exclusive to be inclusive of all, from discipline to multidisciplinary, all of us. And that's what I will say to him. If you want one state, go for one state, do it. I don't mind, even as a Palestinian, to be with one state with equal citizenship right. I live in Canada. As a Canadian, I don't ask anything because I am a Canadian with equal citizenship right to anyone in Canada, anyone here in UK, as long as he is English and he has the British citizenship, he has equal citizenship to anyone. Equal citizenship rights is the mandate which helps all of us to live. So I would love to hear from him, but I will never accept to keep the status quo as it is, because it's destructive to Israelis and to Palestinians and to widen the gap between us.
Yeah, I mean, of course, but we need to create about 10 million people like you in that area.
There are many, believe me. The world is not in shortage of good people. There are many good people who are coming here today to support. I am sure they have the goodwill to speak. There are many great people, but we need to speak out.
Do you remember when Edward...
We need to speak out.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Do you remember Edward Said in the early 90s? He said something like, one of the things that might help is if both sides could understand the experience of the other. And he said, you have to understand the Israeli psyche and how so much of it has come out of the experience of the Holocaust. And he spoke to Palestinians and he said that that is what you need to do. And that was short-lived, just before Oslo. But once there was conflict again, people's capacity for that kind of empathy or understanding, there were very few people who could manage that anymore, because violence often does turn people to hatred. But
But because violence, you know, what breeds violence? It has its causes. I can make you violent if I did harm to you.
Yeah.
I can. It's man-made. It's induced. It's manufactured. What do you expect from the Palestinians when they are facing, what do they face at the checkpoints, the settlements, the expansion? Even what surprises me now, he is going to annex the West Bank. Annexation of the West Bank, it's fine if you want to annex it, but they can't be second or third class citizens. If you want to annex it and to make it one state, let them equal citizens as your citizens and to control everything. But you can't keep them as third or fourth citizenship class. It's not, and this creates anger and it keeps us in this vicious circle of violence, and we must cut it to face it with reality. And I say, the patient, we are living in a sick society.
Yes.
As Palestinians and Israelis.
Yeah.
And unless the patient admits he is sick
Yeah.
and to ask for help and to seek medical advice, he will never be cured. So we need the help of the international community and to encourage our patient, maybe because of the ego, no, I don't want to admit, or the stigma to say I am sick. No, we want to encourage them to take responsibility that they are sick and there is a cure for their disease.
I think that's well put, because when you are very sick, you need a lot of help, because you often can't do it yourself.
Yeah, we need the help. That's why the
Yeah.
international community, all of the people around us who are willing to help us.
What do you think about what Trump's up to? Do you think he's going to help you with your sickness?
Oh, wow. You know, Trump as a Palestinian or as a Canadian? Because now you know what is he
Either.
doing for Canadians now. So I will be honest. I want to ask you a question.
Try.
If a Trump, what is he saying? What is he spreading in this world? From fear, incitement, and hatred. If any other leader from the world is spreading, what is he doing? What do you think the states will do? The troops will move to get rid of this leader. I think Americans, they deserve a better leadership and they can play active role, because I saw him once.
He invited you in, did he?
I
Come
was
see?
invited to the national prayer breakfast to give a keynote speech. He was there.
Did he?
And he is amazing guy in hiring and firing. And he is doing that job great. On that event, he hired one and fired one.
So you had a breakfast with him?
No, not with him, with the group, you know.
Yeah.
But I attended his speech with the group, with the audience.
Ah, he didn't ask you to speak about your work or how you think?
You know, I don't know if he reads or not.
No, he doesn't read.
They say that he doesn't read. All right, you know.
We do know he doesn't read. I don't think he will have read your book. We can be sure of that.
You remember his book when he wrote, you know, Hillary Clinton.
Someone else read it for him.
Yeah. Hillary Clinton, when she wrote her book, what happened? He said, I happened. He is the one to happen.
But in a way, you're the antidote, aren't you? You're the one who believes in hope and human nature at its best. He's the voice that says people essentially are kind of Machiavellian and don't behave well. And he somehow tries to encourage, he speaks to that bit of all of us. And you speak to the kind of more benign, generous bit that wants to reach out. And I suppose we've got both inside us.
I speak to the people as people everywhere. Even what do I say here? I say it in Palestine, I say it in Bahrain, in any Arab country. It's not, you know, different message because you are a British Jews or anyone. It's the same message because it's needed everywhere. For President Trump, if they care about Israel and they want to put an end, they can be biased, but not to feel Palestinians are negotiating. When they negotiate with the Trump, they are negotiating with Netanyahu. So I fully believe Trump is sitting on the same seat as Netanyahu, and they can moderate, because moderator or facilitator is different from taking a part or being the part. So he is taking a part. Let the Palestinians, why he doesn't want all of the world, UK, the European Union, to be engaged in this negotiation, and the states. We want the states to be there. It's important to make it as international, and all of them to put an end, to work with the United States.
At the moment, the Palestinian government is saying it's going to have nothing to do with the United States. It's sort of looking to Russia and...
Why? Why do you think?
Why? Because of what's happened on Jerusalem at this point.
Yeah, because, all of the European countries, the Security Council, because it's an international resolution, and they can't change the United Nations. If they want to change and to take it by their hand, depending on their power, how do we want to have order in this world? We want to have order in this world by respecting and empowering and enforcing the United Nations resolutions. That's why every country can say, I am not going to accept it.
So you're talking about the importance of an honest broker, someone who's not on one side. And
It's important. If you want to be broker, a fair one, a semi-fair. We don't want, because, the issue of justice is relative. We want a semi-fair broker who cares about Palestinians and Israelis, to care about both.
who do you think could be an honest broker?
Many, believe me, the European Union, the UK, France.
The UK, did you hear that?
Yes, why not? They can, because I think UK, with their history and link with Palestine and Israel, with the history of Palestine, I think they can play active role.
Okay, well, we'll certainly not pay attention to that. Now, you also talk about one of the changes that needs to happen is to have more women in positions of power. And perhaps you'll talk to us about this charity that you've set up to actually strengthen women's voices in the public arena. I don't know how far you feel that in the end that's the kind of shift that we're going to need to see.
I established this foundation because a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, he's an Israeli Jew. He said to me, Zildin, people will forget. Mark Glazerman, who wrote the introduction of the book.
Yeah.
And I can say about this man, because of Mark Glazerman, as a human, when we speak about human beings, because of him, and the relationship I have with him, I can forgive, and I forgave all of the Israelis for what did they do. Because of Mark Glazerman, that a human being, that a close friend to me. So I said, if the world is forgetting, I will never forget my daughters. And that's the promise I gave. I will never give up. I will never forget. And as a believer, I believe one day I will meet them. I see them talking to me. What did you do for us? I want to meet them with a big gift. That their holy souls and noble blood wasn't waste. It made a difference in others' lives. But which means it's not the bullet or the shell. The bullet and the shell is the weapon of the weak.
Yeah.
Education and words are the stronger means to make the change. That's why Daughters for Life was established for education of girls and young women from the Middle East to spread that message, which was their message as peace fighters, engaging in camps, in peace camps. And also because I believe this world can only endure and be a better one with women's education, women's role, and giving them more opportunities. It's not about empowering women. Women, they have the power. They have the potential. But what is needed, the means, and education is a means to an end. And they need to be given the opportunity and the role they practice and deserve. Give me 5 women in the history who were behind disasters in this world. Give me someone to say, I am not in debt to my mother, my sister, my wife, my daughter. So women, they nurture life. Women who give life. Women who can bring peace in our world. There is no peace in this world without women's engagement and women's role in this world. That's why also, because we as men and women, we are not born to compete. We are born to complement each other. So we need to work together. Imagine this world without women. How do you see it? So it's time, let us try to give the women the right means, and I am sure if they didn't succeed, they will never make it worse as it is now. So give them, we need that courage to give them that opportunity and to see what can they do, and they can make it. That's why I believe in women's education, and it's time to admit it for us as women, as men, to support it. So I urge you, as more as you can, to come even with this organization to bring more women and men together to work towards Yachad for Israel, for Palestine, and for peace of Palestinians and Israelis.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is an area of hope, particularly in the Middle East. If you had more women in positions of influence, I think we could almost say it's less likely that we would actually go to war. I think the very act that women give birth, and I think the fact that you are involved in giving birth is profound in terms of how you actually think about life.
Because I know the meaning of birth. I feel the passion to the woman, the suffering, even during a pregnancy. The 9 months, I know, even as an infertility specialist, believe me, my heart can't tell any woman that we did IVF, and I know the result, that there is no pregnancy. I can't tell her. To say to her, sorry, it failed this time. Because I know how hard did she suffer for a month to take injections, to follow up, ovum pick up, embryo transfer, and she is waiting for someone to give her hope. So we need to understand how women, they raise and they value their children. Women, they breastfeed and they suffer, even in life. 80% of the work in our life is done by women, at home and outside. So we need to understand the role of women, women who sacrifice, who give, who nurture, who give birth, who love without limits, who forgive. So it's time to see more women on the negotiating table as equal as men. Believe me, they can at least moderate or make the environment more human, not political. Not now. I don't see any Palestinian or Israeli women sitting on the table.
You're so right.
So we need to see more women sitting on the table.
Yeah. My final question to you, I think they're going to be looking for a new president in Palestine. Have you given any thought to spreading this message?
Which is message? As what?
Have you? I know you did stand as a politician in Gaza.
But I will never repeat it.
In 2006. Yeah, I know. It was a bad experience, wasn't it? But
yeah, it's not, believe me, I see it as positive. I remember it. Always, I don't look backwards. On that time, I ran for the election as independent candidate. and I saw the competition between the parties, Fatah and Hamas. By night, midnight, when we have the results, I realized I didn't succeed. I said to my team, my friends who came to support, this page is over. Let us tomorrow start a new day. It's a new day. And thanks God I didn't succeed. Because if I succeeded, I will be stuck with the current situation. And always, this is one thing for you. In every bad thing we see in life, there is something good. My failure, what we consider failure in the election, it was for good cause.
Yeah, I did think that the answer would be you were not going to be a politician, but maybe the voice you carry and what you stand for and represent, how are we going to inject that into the political system?
I do it when I visit Palestine. I have many events to speak in Palestine, in Israel. I don't want to be controlled by any faction or anyone. I do and I say what do I believe in, and to meet with the friends, with people, with politicians, with leaders, and to say what is supposed to be done. And the message, it's important, it resonates with people in Palestine and in Israel. But we hope this message to resonate more with politicians. I was even last November, I was in Israel. I gave a speech at the Knesset, and to speak to them and to say, what do I say here? So it's important, it can resonate, but by the end, we need to work with politicians and more to humanize and to attract them to understand that we need politicians who are risk takers. Risk takers and the challenging, that they can sacrifice their position for justice and for the good for their nation and the people.
Actually, I'm just going to end. That was the last but one question I've decided. You ended in your book, you didn't call it a manifesto for peace. I think it's what I called it. But you called it the lessons of life to be learnt. And you said you had many lessons, but you talked about things like hate is blindness and it leads to irrational thought. It's time for women to take the lead. Good ideas become great when they become shared. What's the final message you want to leave with this audience for people to take away? Because there may be 150 people in this room, and each person will make a difference. And it's what they now do. It's not enough to do it, to listen. It's what each person does. What would you like people to take away?
I can say to you to have faith, have hope, but most important, to take action. And not to underestimate the size of your action. To spread this message you have here. To spread the work of Yachad and other organizations which are promoting to bring people together, to engage in organizations. And in life, we have priorities. And the priority in life, that's what I learned, is not the history, is not the past. The priority in life is the present and the future. The past is to learn from it. I can say, who is the present and the future? Our children and the future generations. They are the present and the future. And we are accountable to them. And we need to ask ourselves, what legacy do we want to inherit and to pass and to leave behind to our children? Is it a heavy mortgage? Is it a disaster or a good, peaceful, safe, secure life? It's our responsibility. Start by yourself. Don't look for others or wait for others. Start by yourself and take action to make that little difference, to give a smile, to give hand to others, to say the right word to the people. Believe me, everyone can do something. When we all come together, as we have here, Yachad together, we can make the Palestinians' world and the Israelis' world a better one, and the world in general to be a safe, secure one. That's what I hope you can take with you. And from today, to take this message and to think, what can you do? Thank you, and God bless you.
And we should thank you as an inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My name is Hannah Weisfeld, and I'm the director of Yachad. I want to start by offering heartfelt thanks both to Gabrielle and to Iseldine for being here this evening. And I feel bad to cut the conversation short, because I'm sure everybody like me was spellbound listening to you. And it's quite rare to have such a hopeful and inspiring message. And I don't think that I've ever met anyone who embodies that idea that against all odds and against the most terrible, tragic circumstances, it really is possible to not just imagine, but fight for a different future. And that is a message that I think each one of us can take home with us this evening. And Iseldine and I have been talking maybe for nearly a year about his trip to London. And in between us talking and him arriving, I actually had a child and had a baby. And listening to you talk about the importance of motherhood and birth rings very personally true to me. And so I'm really, really happy that you're here, and really looking forward to spending the rest of the week with you when you travel to universities across the country, to Parliament, to Whitehall, to talk to people about the work that you're doing. It's also really brilliant to see over 200 of you here tonight. Lots of you are familiar faces. Some of you we're meeting for the first time this evening. And we're all here because we care passionately about Israel and ensuring that it not just survives, but flourishes as a safe and secure Jewish and democratic state. It's reassuring to know that none of us are alone in this endeavour. We all want to safeguard the values on which the State of Israel was founded and that are enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. A country based on freedom, justice and peace that guarantees equality to all its inhabitants, irrespective of race, religion or sex. Yet, these values are under threat from both internal and external forces. We believe that long-term unresolved conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people threatens Israel's viability and its future as a democratic and Jewish state. But more than that, we believe in a different future, and that we can, and indeed are responsible for shaping that future. And that is why we are here, and I think that we heard that message very clearly. As diaspora Jews, we have a stake in Israel's future. We lend political support, we advocate for it, and many of us donate money towards Israel. Successive Israeli governments have relied and counted on their relationship with the diaspora, which is particularly unique. But for too long, we have allowed others to determine the fabric of that relationship. We see diaspora Jewish communities that do not honestly grapple with the challenges facing Israel today. And by not doing so, they help to perpetuate a political status quo, one that involves maintaining a now 50-year-old occupation over 2.5 million people, and one that ultimately entrenches conflict with the Palestinian people and threatens Israel's future. I vividly remember, and I'm sure many of you do, and Iseldine spoke about it here this evening, the 1990s, when Prime Minister Rabin was still alive, and the Oslo peace process was bringing the end to the conflict through the creation of a Palestinian state. Yet not everybody supported that vision, and those who opposed the process began organising to create a network of diaspora Jews who would oppose a two-state solution and support ongoing settlement building. So when people tell me today, and they frequently do, that there is no possibility of peace, Netanyahu's entering his 10th successive year in power, and we have a flourishing and emboldened settler movement right at the heart of the Israeli government, my response is that we should remember that those in power in Israel today are only there because of the hard work that took place in the 1990s, when they were going to be confined to the history books. And we should take heart from that message, and we should be inspired by the knowledge that building networks, inspiring the next generation, and articulating for a vision for the future, and then organising to achieve it is what makes change happen. That is not a short-term project. We need to build a network of supporters of Israel that share our values and our vision for a safe and secure democratic and Jewish state alongside an independent Palestine. So what does this look like? We are a diaspora voice that advocates for a viable political resolution to the conflict and an end to the occupation. We represent a significant part of our community that believes in this vision, and we are building a network to create the foundations for political change. We connect our supporters, all of you in the room, to each other. We build alliances with organisations here and in Israel that share our values, and with politicians both in the UK and in Israel who want to fight for a different future and ensure that the region is a peaceful one. The challenges of the political climate should not put us off. If anything, they should encourage us to work a little bit harder. So to tell you a little bit about what we do, firstly, and you really captured, I feel like I paid you to say my words, that the next generation is so important to us, and we know that they are the key to a different future. And that's why we work with them really closely inside the Jewish community, providing them with ways to engage with Israel and to fight for the change they wish to see. And last year we worked with over 2,300 young people in their schools, Jewish youth movements, and on university campuses. We took many of them to the West Bank and East Jerusalem on programs, keeping them informed, engaged, and ready to step up. Just 2 weeks ago, and the minister spoke about this earlier, over 30 of them launched a campaign to try and stop demolitions of Palestinian homes in Area C of the West Bank. And the reason they did it is because they visited those villages when they were on their trips, and they believe that demolishing them will create further hopelessness and make peace less possible. And they're meeting with Israeli and British political representatives to talk about the work they're doing and why they think it's important. We recognise how important it is to have a network of active supporters that can advocate for change from a place of knowledge. And that is why in 2017, we brought Israeli and Palestinian peace activists, journalists to the UK to meet with members of our community. And why we took so many of you and have taken so many of you out into the field, into East Jerusalem and the West Bank since 2011 when we launched. Hundreds of you have come to meet Israelis and Palestinians that are working for change on the ground. We represented your opinions at the Board of Deputies, at the World Jewish Congress, in the mainstream media and in the Jewish media. And last year, many of you contacted over 100 parliamentary candidates ahead of the general election in June, asking them that if they were to be elected, to put the Israel-Palestine conflict on their political agenda inside the British Parliament. And in 2017, we continued as an organisation to forge relationships with political stakeholders in this country, meeting with MPs, meeting with officials in the Foreign Office, despite the distraction of a general election. And I'm so pleased that our Minister has been able to join us here this evening and to meet so many of you earlier on. This year, we will spend in the region of £250,000 on the work I have described. And on your seats, in your brochures, you can see a breakdown as to exactly how we spend that money. £250,000 is not huge sums of money, and with the support and generosity of each of you in the room, we can raise it, and we can contribute to the groundswell of change that is so needed. It's easy to think it's not worth the effort or the money in this current political climate to invest in change. But resolving to be part of the change takes a certain amount of courage. Being the change is about making a choice right here, right now, that you can be part of a narrative that has been hijacked by so many other conflicting voices. Dr. Abu Leish came through a tragic personal and national experience and resolved not to hate. It is our responsibility to face the future with similar resolve, not with fear, but with hope and pride. Your personal attitude will rub off on those around you. And if you have children, they too will believe that it is possible to make a difference and that they can have an impact. This is what it means to be the change, to have the courage to hope. Our Jewish tradition is founded on principles of justice, and it is those principles that we want our Jewish state to embody. Our history teaches us that against all odds, we can make change, even in the most challenging of circumstances. And what better example do we have than the very existence and creation of the State of Israel? So please fill in the pledge card that is about to be given to you. And before you write down an amount, know that every pound you give us is your opportunity not just to invest in hope, but to turn that hope and invest in hope and turn it into real long-term change. We are a small and nimble organisation, and your financial support really has the possibility to be transformative to us. So thank you in advance for your support. When you filled in your pledge card, please return them to either the person that gave them to you or the people standing on the door. And please join us downstairs in the auditorium where we were earlier for coffee and dessert. And Dr. Abulaish will be signing copies of his book if you'd like one.